Hey everybody, welcome to the Matthew Street channel. I am your host, Matthew Street. Always appreciate you being here. And folks, I don't talk about this band enough, the Rolling Stones. I know, mainly I'm a Beatles fanatic, Beatlemaniac, whatever you want to call it. I'm always been one of those guys, are you a Beatles or a Stones man? One of those, and you got to pick and choose. I don't think you should have to pick and choose, but I would always choose the Beatles. Obviously, the Beatles were the first musical artist or band I ever got into as a young boy, way back in 1964. Thank you, Mom and Dad. But anyway, I don't talk enough about Mick, Keith, Bill, Brian, and Charlie. I just don't do it. And I should, because I really like the Rolling Stones. I've been a big fan of theirs since I was a little kid. And they've kind of a little bit behind the Beatles for me, but they've kind of run parallel with the Beatles as far as my interest in them and purchasing their music and their albums and then later on their CDs and whatnot. Now, I'm going to be honest and upfront right away. I do not have everything by the Rolling Stones, not even close. I'm not a completist. I probably should get my button gear a little more and get some more of their recordings, because I would like to have a complete Rolling Stones output someday, at least their studio albums anyway. I would really love to have that. But I thought today what I would do is to talk a little bit about the Stones and do a Stones video, is that I would tell some Stones stories, some stoned stories, as it were, okay? Just, 5 or 6 little tidbits about some of the albums I got over the years and what they meant to me, and a little story that goes behind them. Now, the first story I want to tell you is the kind of the saddest story of all of them, because there's a rare Stones LP out there. Many of you probably know of this. I wouldn't say is a die cut or it's just cut a certain way, but it's a octagon shaped album called Through the Past Darkly, Big Hits Volume 2. I'm not sure how rare that is, but from my understanding, it's pretty hard to get an original, and it could be rather costly. Correct me if I'm wrong, you Stones fans out there, you big Stones fans out there. Well, many years ago, I'm at a yard sale near where I live, and I saw a copy of this album. However, wait till you see the condition this thing was in, sitting in the box of all this person's records. First of all, it smelled like somebody's attic or somebody's basement. So here it is. Look at the chew and rips and tear on the cover. All right. Here's the back. And here's the inside. Again, the chews, the tears. Looks like hell, right? 50 cents. I couldn't pass it up, even though I knew I would never play this thing, because you're not really going to see it, but it's on the London label. It's beat up, folks. You can see some of the scuffing and where those scratches were at the top of the album there. You can tell whatever happened to this thing, it bled through into like the first track on each side of this album. I mean, it's the nicks and dents taken out of the vinyl. No covering, no sleeve to put it in. It's just ripped cardboard, and so I keep it in there. But folks, for 50 cents, I threw down 2 quarters and I took it. If for anything, just to maybe have it, I don't know, as a framing quality, and which I've never done, or something. But I just, to see something like this unique, I said I got to grab it. For 50 cents, I'll never play it. The cover's beat up, terrible. I grabbed it. All right, so that's my sad Stones story. Now, my first Stones album ever, though, was in the late 60s. I think my dad used to bring me Beatles albums and such. Well, he brought this home to me one day. Big Hits, High Tide, and Green Grass. This was my first Rolling Stones album. And folks, this is where I first really got into the Stones and loved them and said, wow, this is a great band. It had a great booklet inside, which was really good for someone like me, being a young kid at this time when he gave it to me, where I could see pictures of the band and kind of get to know them a little bit or get a feel for what they were all about. I mean, these images are burnt into my brain. I stared at this little booklet inside the album so much, looked at these pictures, and I just fell in love with it. I just thought this was the greatest thing, and was so happy to get it when he brought it home to me. The inner sleeve has all different other releases on the London label. Okay. But I just love this album. It's a sentimental pick or favorite of mine. And that's my first Stones album. Now, my second Stones album, surprisingly enough, was a live album. This one right here. Got Live If You Want It. Again, late 60s, early 70s, I think I got this. But this was my second. Still have it. And again, it's on the blue London Stereophonic label. And again, I love this. There was something very rocking and raw about this that when I first heard it, it just further cemented my love for the band. I just said, they're kind of like the alternative Beatles. Like, I love the Beatles for what they were, and the Stones, I love them, but for different reasons. They had a different rawness, roughness about them that I liked. The bluesy, rockin' nature, devil may care attitude, whatever. But I really like the Stones. Again, never to the level the Beatles always were for me, but they were always right there. And I just want to say that there's no reason you can't love both bands, whether it be for different reasons or not. You can still be a big fan and love both. And I'm sure most of you relate to that. So this was my second Stones album. Now, my third Stones album was one my cousins got me into. And it's this one right here, Sticky Fingers. All right, mine has the working zipper and everything, okay? I don't want to play around with it too much. It might fall apart, but my cousins had this. I was at their house. They also turned me on to albums like, early Paul McCartney, early John Lennon, Plastic Ono Band, The Rubber Soul, Sgt. Pepper. My cousins, 3 boys, were a little older than me, and they really, along with my parents, cemented my love for the Beatles. But they also turned me on to other music, and this was one of the albums they turned me on to, Sticky Fingers. They played this for me. I remember my cousin opening this up and we were laughing at the inside cover here. I remember saying to him, well, which one's Mick? Which one's Keith? Like, I want to know who was who. And here's the back and the inner sleeve. And I remember him going through this picture with me and saying, all right, which one's Mick? Where's Mick? And he was trying to find Mick. And I used to think this was Mick, which ended up being Keith. But he said, no, that's Mick over there yawning. That's Mick. That's Keith. And he done Charlie and Bill Wyman. And then, of course, you got Mick Taylor over here. He was trying to teach me about the band at the time. This was right when this album first came out. And I just was so enamored by, the music on here. Because to me, being that kid, I was just so like, wow, that's intense. That's heavy stuff, And so that memory will always stick with me of my cousin getting me into Sticky Fingers and just absolutely loving that album. An odd Stones album that I have, I thought I'd show you. Maybe you Canadian viewers could tell me a little bit more about it. It's on the APGO label as you look at the vinyl itself. It's on APGO, right? It's an APGO label. And it's called the Stones 30 Greatest Hits. Yeah, 30 Greatest Hits. And as you look at it, this is volume 1. So obviously they didn't fit all 30 on here, but you get a bunch on this, volume 1. It says RCA also, though. APGO, then on the label, then RCA here, then TV Records over here. I don't know what this is, but it says Made in Canada. So I don't know, but I know that's a lot of music jammed on here. It doesn't have the best sound. You got 3, 6, 9, 3, 6, like 7 or 8 on the 9 on side 1, like 7 or 8 on side 2. It's just really jammed on there. And it says 30 Greatest Hits on the label, but I think because there is a volume 2, which I don't have. Has anyone ever seen this before? Do you know anything about it? I don't think the sound was that good from what I remember, but that's kind of my unique, odd little Beatles album. And it came out in 1977. Next one I want to tell you about is my memories of this one, Tattoo You. This was big. This is when the Stones made that big major North American jaunt across the United States. My friends and I wanted so bad to try to get to this tour. I don't think it came too close to me up here in New England in the Northeast. It might have come to the New York area. I don't remember, but I remember we tried to finagle and figure out a way. I was only like 19 at the time, how to get to see one of these shows, and it just didn't work out. But boy, we love this album. I was still in the service in 1981 when it came out, and just a fanatic about this album. I just thought it was the greatest thing ever. I had kind of gotten away from the Stones a little bit to this point, a little bit. And yeah, kind of after Emotional Rescue. Emotional Rescue was okay for me, but it didn't really grab me as much as like Some Girls did a couple of years prior to that. But when this came out, I kind of came back full bore to the Stones and became such a big fan. And I remember we paid for a pay-per-view to see them on that tour. And George Thorogood was one of the openers for him. It was such a big deal in 1981 or whatever it was to see the Stones on a pay-per-view on a big TV at the time, one of those big projection TVs. And the result of that was we got this. We got the Still Life Live album that came out in 1982, kind of a mini document of that tour because it's only a single disc. But so happy to have it. You get some nice images inside. And just, that was a big memory for me of when they came around in 81. That was a big, big deal. It was one of the biggest tours they had ever done. The stage show was fantastic and everybody loved it. And my final thing I wanted to talk about is the first time I saw the Rolling Stone live. I've seen them 2-3 times live over the years. The first time was this tour right here. When this album came out again, for some reason, in the mid to late 80s, after Undercover was okay in 83, but when Dirty Work came out in 86, again, for a few years prior to this, I got away from the Stones again. I just drifted a little bit. But again, this one, like Tattoo You years earlier, Steel Wheels comes out in 1989. I only have the CD, but this is my original CD. I absolutely came back to the Stones again, full bore. I thought this album was wonderful, so excited about it. The Stones are back, you know, Dirty Work. But this, I was back again. I was a big fan again. And luckily for me, in 1989, a friend of mine went to see the Rolling Stones, my first show ever, at Foxborough Stadium, which is now long gone. Now it's been rebuilt. Gillette Stadium where the Patriots play. But Foxborough Stadium, 1989, and they killed, folks. They absolutely killed. It was a big return for them that year. They did like 60 shows across the United States. It was Bill Wyman's final last hurrah with the band. After that, he'd be gone. And wow, that show, I've never seen a stage production or stage itself physically as impressive and as immense as this one. I mean, there was steps coming up the sides of it that we were off on the as you're looking out from the stage, we were off on the right about halfway up, but close. And when Keith or Mick would come up these stairs on the side that rose up and up and up on the side of this massive steel wheel stage, I mean, you could see the whites of Keith or Mick's eyes. They were that close to us on this stage step scaffolding. It was unbelievable. Any of you that remember that tour or saw that show, you'll know what I'm talking about. Unheard of at the time, unbelievably massive. So impressive. And for years, I've always said, oh, I wish I had a document of that tour. You know, finally, in 2020, I had to get this. This comes out. All right, a souvenir of the Steel Wheels tour finally comes out in 2020. It's called Steel Wheels Live, Atlantic City, New Jersey. And there's special guests that were at that show. This show must have been around the same time mine was because this is in the Northeast. And Axl Rose and Izzy Stradlin from Guns N' Roses. You have Eric Clapton and the great John Lee Hooker also shows up for the show. And so I've taken the liberty of putting things in protective coverings here, but let me show you what this beautiful set here. So there is a gatefold, I believe. No, there is not. It's just 2 slip pockets. But I took the albums out of the sleeves. I didn't want them ruined. But here's a document of that tour, how they dressed, how the stage looked. There's another one. Look at this great, great images. The Steel Wheels tour. I'd love to know how many of you also saw it. It was unbelievably great. You get talks about the tour here, and then look at the beautiful vinyl you get. You get a nice like light blue, and then you get a orange, and again, different labels, but orange and light blue. So 4 total albums of music, live Stones. One more sleeve to show you. Folks, I'll always love this band. You know, will they ever supplant the Beatles for me? Absolutely not. I mean, I'm too old now at this point in my early 60s to supplant the Beatles. I love the Beatles too much. But the Stones are up there, folks. I absolutely love them. I think they're fabulous. And I just wanted to tell you some Stones stories, that this band does mean a lot to me. I will always be a fan, and I appreciate you being here today and watching and listening a little bit about my experiences with the second greatest pop rock band, rock and roll band of all time, in my opinion, the Rolling Stones. Love you all. I love you Stones fans as well. Bye-bye.